Hemshech Hayim Beis, Volume 1, the end of Discourse, Lamed Ches 38. And the end of chapter 152. Where he began tying together all the points. So I'll just summarize the second half of the chapter. After the long discussion of two types, it says he started to explain the Ovis and Matan Torah. That the Ovis is the Armam Shikh, as he says, from the Shadish of the Eir HaGvul, and even higher in order, from higher than the Kav HaMidah, higher than the measuring, the regulator, into existence, Shaddai. Remember all the interpretations in Shaddai. One, Shaddai, Omer Leilome Dai. Two, Shaddai, Dai Machsere, or he said, from the word Hakesi Lachem Bracha Ad Bli Dai. Ad Sheyivlu Sepsasechem Malem Dai. So it's still Dai, but it's still, so it's not complete Bli Gvul. Remember he said that? It's Ad Sheyiv, so there's a certain limit. But it's a form of Bli Dai. In Dai. Then we had the Taich Meloshin B'Shidud Marachis, B'Shadid.
And Bichas Shadayim.
That right, Bichas Shadayim as well, which is Hashpah. Bichas Shadayim, right?
Ribu Shefa.
Huh? Ribu Shefa. And I said Shidud Hamarachis, which was maybe the highest interpretation, the suspension, would we say the shattering of the rules of nature. But that's Nisim B'derech, Nisim that are concealed in Derech HaTeva. We're not talking about Nisim Gluyim, which is Bli Gvul Mamish. We're talking about in Derech HaTeva itself, it's not Elokim, it's Shaddai. So the Ovis clearly are taking existence and expanding its boundaries to the fullest possible extent, right? To be able to create, to create a environment where there's no unique Asachitzenim. Because before the Ovis, the world was also Ikar Shechina B'Tachtenim, but then came Chet Eitzadas, there was the Chsar Halavon. The Ovis brought into an energy that not just maintains existence, but also brings Elikus into it. But it's Elikus within the parameters of existence. So Chris's bris of Noach was also an achievement. In other words, you could go like this. You have the world is created, everything is Elam HaMiluya Nivrit, it's a perfect world. It's aligned. But there's potential for a fall. And then it happens. They eat from the tree of knowledge, which is a result of the Chassan HaLevana, like we looked, the Chassan HaLevana symbolizes that Malchus doesn't have all its intense energy, so there's a Helam. That is rooted in the Shviras HaKeim, it's rooted all the way in the Tzimtzum Adishon, as he said. The Malk Adishon is Tzimtzum Adishon. So the Tzimtzum had an impact, Chet Eitzadas. Then came the 10 generations, as the Pirkei Avos says, that the Elam was Machisin. What was it? What's the Lashon? Machisin Abayin Lefanov. Or the Bas Legani, in Mamarim from Medrash, that every generation brought it down further destruction. To the point Eibishter is Mala Aretz Shachas, corruption, which brought the destruction of the Mabul. Then comes Neachish Tzaddik. Neachish Tzaddik reverses it. As clearly Neach is not Avram. So what does Neach do? The Chris's Bris, he says, Yichud Chitzeni of Avah, that God brings it back, will bring it back to the pre-Mabul state. And from here on, I'll never bring a Mabul again, the world will be sustained. But that's just sustenance, that's just maintenance. So it's Yichud Chitzeni. Then comes the Ovis, Avram Hizchila Hayir. This is the Chris's Bris, is Angili Elikus. So in some places it talks about Yichud Pnimi, of Abba V'Ima, but according to this Drush, it's Yichud Chitzeni, but the Gili Elikus, so it's like a higher level in Yichud Chitzeni of Abba V'Ima. Or in the language of what we've been learning, that it's Meichin, but connected to Midas. Because Midas reflect the world. Meichin reflects higher than existence. So it's Midas as they reflect the Midas. But Midas as it's in Meichin so Midas Atzmim, we're not talking about Midas as it is in Bria, it's a high level of Midas, a high level of application of inclinations. So the structure of existence is being recognized, but it's the Midas Lamaila, as he said. What's Midas Lamaila? It's not like Midas Lamaila, it's not Ispilus, because of weakness, not Shlemus Atzmus. In other words, basically, to put it in different words, it's like Esesphere Sagnusis. The others saw the structure of the world the way God sees the structure of existence. It's a divine structure. Which that, they brought in Gilead Lakus in the world. Before that, you didn't have that extent of connection. So yes, in the beginning of creation you had it, but there was a possible concealment. That's why Machsere. They did die Machsere. They filled in the lack. They filled in the lack, and they brought in the Kil Shaddai. That's a short summary of this last thing. What he calls it as the Gili of Eira Chochmeh, not just Eira Bina, which also can explain that Noach is more Gili Yichud Chitzeni Abba Ve'ima, but primarily Bina. I think he actually says that, right? Yeah. Bechinas Bina. B'riyah Datzilis. And the obvious is Bechinas Chochmeh. Chitzeni is Abba Bechinas Chochmeh. And we learn that Chochmeh is in general a higher state than Bina, because Bina, as he said, is Meir Mirachik, from a distance. Bina is already outside of the Etzem, like a Muhus Nivdal. Or what, as he called it when he spoke about the Miluyim, the Yud Kei Vav Kei. That Bina is already has a Milui. It is similar to Chachma because it's Milui Yud and everything except the Vav. It's an Aleph. So it's already beginning to have a diminishing. That will lead to Midas, and so on. Chachma, however, remains above that. So essentially the others bring Chitzenius Chachma. Yisrael Saba Tfuna, Chitzenius, not Pnimis, according to this Hemshach. But it's interesting, he brings the other opinion because it just shows you that the others went very high up. They're as high as you can go within the parameters of existence.
The difference between Abba, Pnimi, and Chitzenius is like the Abba being in Loin and Tatayim?
Yeah, clearly, yeah, for sure.
Just for myself.
Yeah. So now we'll finish the Maimer. Pi Hanal, according to the above, we'll understand what he began the Maimer. Let's go back. The beginning of the Maimer was Keresh Mitzurim Eren. What did he say in the beginning? I just want to refresh ourselves. He said, Meresh Tzurim Elo HaAvis. These are the Avis. So he says in the Medrash, in the beginning God wanted to establish the world, but he couldn't do it. He couldn't find to do it until the others came around. They established. They gave an example of a melech that wanted to build a country. He came to establish the foundation, but the waters were coming from the Grunt, the Untergrund, which is the inner, we call it springs. Tahim is the Yisad, the depths of where the water originates, from the belly of the earth. So it's like a foundation. The waters are coming up. Didn't allow. That's where he found Shur Gadol. They say Alzani Kaveh found a big stone. The stone is a solid ground. When there's water creates porousness. You can't build a foundation when it's liquidy. So here he found that Shur Gadol. It's the Moshe. It came with Chila. Same day Eibishter wanted to establish the world. There was a Rishayim did not allow it. Till it came the Avis. Eibishter said, "V'zachu Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Elani Misken." On them I will build it. Like it says, "Ki Hashem Mitzukei Aretz, v'Yoshos Aleim Hevel." Tevel. So clearly, v'Yoshos is that He established upon them existence. The Tevel, how would they translate in Yiddish? Huh? Yeah, but there's also in Yiddish they would say the Tevel, the Weltkugel, not the Weltkugel. They would say Tevel. No.
That's the argument in Yiddish.
In Yiddish, but they would say Tevel when we translate it in Chumash. Tevel. I remember Pnei HaTehem. No, it would say Cheshach al Pnei HaTehem. Tehem. What would they say Tehem? Tehem is also in the Gansidos. Like it says also by Kerach, right? Kol Ha. That he was swallowed. Kol Ha. Not Tehem also, right? Tehem.
I heard last year's interview with Marx. I put it. I went under the law. Very nice. Whoa.
Anyway, so B'Kitzer, So he asked the questions. I'm just going back to the beginning. The Medrash, the Cheda, is surprising. What does it mean God wanted to establish and he couldn't? And what's establishing more that's not creation of the world? And what's Meitzim? Which means it's a davar pashat she'emakim mavakish l'kein v'hechem etzinu zes. Meitzim. We find where? And he went continued on. I'm just going back to the questions before we answer them. He says, Shukav Amudei Shev, Sheikav, it says that we know that God desired the world. But where it says that he wanted to establish it? Why is it like a given? And what does it mean that the Rishonim didn't allow it? How could they not allow God to establish the world he wants to establish? And why the Ovis with Dafka Zeicha? He also asked questions, what's the Lashon v'Zachu? Should have just said, Acha Ba'u Ovis. And Gam Tzach Lomar Omer Shoya Mokim Avakish, the Shem HaMokim, and why Mokim? These are all the questions. Now let's go back to the answers. So obviously it's clear, talking about the Ovis. So he's going to say like this, according to the above, we'll understand what it says in Medrash Rabbah. Medrash Rabbah Boy, Parshat Tezvov. In the beginning of the Maimer, I just read on page 290. Okay. What means the Eibishter wanted to establish the world? It doesn't mean he wanted to create the world. Obviously he created the world, we know that. He wanted something more. Canaan is establishing. That means he wants that the world should have so-called value. Should have a sustenance, I would say a quality. So like you could build something, and you still don't have the Canaan, you want it to be established.
Permanence.
A certain permanence, a certain value, quality. That means there should be Gilead Lakuz Be'elam. That's what they want. That's not creation and sustenance of the world. Because the creation of the world comes from a chsaron, from the tzimtzum, from a diminishment, and the depriving, what's the opposite? The negation, the opposite of revelation. And it says, what's the union of a kain to establish the world? Should be Gilead Lakus. So you can create a world, there's no Gilead Lakus. It's a world that's concealed. That's why he says, that's why the Medrash says, interesting, what's made gefint? Gefint means you find that it's like it's a simple thing. He doesn't, you don't say that expression always. That you find. Meitzimanu means that it's a given. We know this as a given. That's what Meitzimanu means. It could also mean it says elsewhere, but it means that it's a given basically. It's a preconceived given. Why is that Pashat? Because that's definitely the intention, the inner intention. Because the intention of creating the world was not that there should be just a Metzias Hayesh, period. So it's a Meitzimanu, it's a double Pashat. That the purpose is ki'im tachas hakavona, rather the ultimate purpose is husha'elam yir gilei lakus. That the world should radiate, illuminate divine revelation, gilei lakus. So here he's touching on no mates, and like he said in the beginning of the Maimer, it's a davar pashat. Okay. Interesting if you can apply that same rule everywhere it says on the Meitzim. Maybe it's not so common.
But is that like a given? I mean, even other streams of Judaism would say the same thing, that it's a given that there should be Gilui L'kus Ba'olam? Or it's not necessarily so?
First of all, other streams, they could go to their streams. I mean, they could say whatever they want to say. Let them touch it a different way.
Right.
That's such an
assumed...
Yeah, you have to say that because unless you say the world has no logic. But to say, look, you say even on human beings, no one creates a machine for no purpose. What would be the purpose just to create a yesh?
But you mentioned it yesterday. We should work. We should challenge. There should be challenges.
Okay, so they'll call Gilei Elokus. They'll call overcoming the challenges. The diuk is not Gilei Elokus. The diuk is something more than just there should be existence. So they'll say that we should subjugate ourselves. I don't think it changes. No, they'll touch Gilei Elokus because there's words of V'nigla K'vei Davai. I mean, you can't deny the words of Gilei Elokus and Chumash and Torah.
Mashiach comes, okay.
Oh no, but they'll say also now what means Gilei Elokus? When you live a life that's not selfish, you align with Torah. That's called Gilei Elokus. That's mean. I don't think it changes that. It means that not that the world should just remain as it is. Or else it would make no sense. Why is he sending you? Everyone agrees there's a tachlis. He did this in Sham Beguf. The shaila is whether it's the Bira Elam or it's for you to gain reward, whatever it may be. And when it says Anu Meitzim, the Rebbe Rashab really, this word is like, he sees it as a key. It means that this was the beginning of creation. This was the purpose. In other words, it was not something that came later. It says in Medrash, in the Pasuk, which is also an odd Pasuk, the Eibishter walked in Gan Eden, Ruach Hayim, which literally means the wind of the day, spirit of the day. What does it say in Medrash? What does it mean? The Ikar Shechina b'tachtenim. This everybody knows. It means Hashem walked. Ruach Hayim means there was a Gilei Elokus. That the Ikar Shechina was not in heaven; it was in tachtenim. Then the Medrash says, see, look, everyone has to deal with the Medrash and Shirim of the Zion. They'll explain that. I mean, I don't know if they have ACs to explain Gilei Elokus, but then they'll say Hela means like Haster Pani. Beis Hamikdash is Gilei. I think everyone agrees it's Gilei. I don't know. They don't develop it into like we can throw our way to bring out. I can't speak for everybody, but without Chassidus, you don't understand what it means. Like, what does it mean, Gilei Elokus? Like, what does it mean? Everyone can understand when the sun rises, it's the dawn. I mean, what is Gilei Elokus? I remember when I was younger, we went to Williamsburg, Taluch. So until Tov Shalom and Zion, when there was the pogrom, it was we went every year to Pesach, Achshar Pesach. I was there that year. After that, it became like Eira Nedachas, and that was it. The bitter finished, the Rebbe said, which is not a good thing when you say a bitter finished. It means that there's no more need for this territory. So I remember I used to always love to go to the Satmar Shul, and I was intrigued. I'm always intrigued. I'm still intrigued to drive through there. Just the whole, seeing the whole culture. I mean, it's here too, but here I like to believe that there's other things. But whatever. So I used to go to the Satmar Shul on Rodney Street. There's a big shul, very big. I remember the old Satmar Rav, they used to bring him out at Shal Sudas time. I was there once Pesach and they brought him out. He was very sick already. Yeah, the Alter Satmar Rav. He passed away in Lamed Tes, summer. Lamed Tes. I saw him in Lamed Vav, Lamed He, I think, Lamed Dalet. Anyway, but I used to go there. And there's anything that looks different to them is like, they surround you. Here there's also people like this, but not everybody, so it would surround me like, because I wore a hat that brimmed down. And I had to have these discussions. I remember when I was like maybe, what year was it? It was Lamed Vav probably. So that would make me 19 years old.
That's when you got sacked then.
Yeah, probably. But you got already earlier, he was already waiting. Anyway, Lamed Vav, so I had this like 20 Satmars there, having this debate. Like, I don't know if they asked me what Chassidus is or what this, but it got to a point, I remember I asked them all a question, which they were like shocked. I said, the Shulchan Aruch says, why do you light candles? Shabbos candles. So it says, Lo yikoshel be'etz u'bev. You shouldn't slip, you shouldn't fall over, stumble over wood or stones. Because once upon a time you lived in places, so the light illuminated Shabbos, day of Menucha. Opposite of Shalom Bayis, if the husband falls over the rocks. Or, as I said today, which house has stones and rocks? Why do we light candles? So Ner Shel Shabbos Kodesh. And what happens if you light it Thursday night? You still make the bracha. And I remember they're looking at me. They never had thought of a question like this. So I said, what I was trying to explain to them a little ruchnius. I said, what happens? On Shabbos you light a candle. It's not just to see. You can shine a flashlight. You can put on the lights. Why do you have to light a candle? To avoid because there's kedusha. What's kedusha? It's a ruchnius. I was talking to a wall. Eitzim Avonim. That's how I felt. They didn't begin to get the alibis of ruchnius. No, they didn't begin to get it. It was shocking. I wasn't shocked, but I was like, I remember very vividly that once I was in a hotel some point, I remember some Shabbos. And I met one Ungarische guys. What are you doing here? I asked him. This was the Ikket. He was the Mashgiach Ruchni. What's the Mashgiach Ruchni? By us, Mashgiach Ruchni is the Mashpia that you go talk to about spiritual matters. He's the Mashgiach in the kitchen. By him Ruchnius, and that's when I realized, by them Ruchnius is kashrus compared to treif. And by us Ruchnius is a little more than that. I'm not saying to criticize the Jewish world. The Jewish world is not educated, the frum world, in what Ruchnius is. Okay, why am I saying it? I don't remember. I'll tell you why. Okay. So that's what he says. So on the pasuk. What does it mean? God is walking the Ruach Hayim. Obviously, it's a metaphor. It's not walking, but the Ruach Hayim signifies Gilui. It means there was a Gilui of Elokus. Gilui Elokus, Ikar Shechina. The Shechina was resting there. Then the Medrash continues. That's when every Chet, it's Adas, and then the other sins, Shechina, so-called rose, meaning became more concealed. Until the end of the 7th generation, from Avram will be Moshe, and I'll bring down the Shekhinah back to Tachtenim in the Mishkan. Anyway, let's go back here. That's why it says Meitzim. That's the Pirush Meitzim, Gefint. Because the Ikar Kavod was already in the beginning of the Bria. So Meitzim Anu, that the Eibishter wanted to establish the world, not just create the world, establish it on strong foundations. That's what means Shanu Meitzim, that we find. But the Rishonim did not allow, they didn't tolerate it. Is a Hebrew word that means a lot of things. Here it means they didn't allow manichin, they were resisting. They were stopping it from happening, impeding. They caused Shiluk HaShechina. That's the same Medrash where this is 7 generations. Like it says in Medrash there. So that's like the water in the Mashal, that the water from the Tehim is not allowing the foundation to. So God wants it. That's His intention. Meitzimanu. That's how it was. But they don't allow it. They're a resistance to it. Why? What is Vizehu? That's why they're resisting it? No. How can they resist such a thing? Because this Hamshachah, the Shabir Gili, is not the primary transmission to create the world. Because the transmission, remember we spoke about the pipes. Transmission to create is a very regulated one, regulated by the Kav Amidah. And that's in a form of Chesarnaya, like we said with Bina before. It's subject to gradations. So gradations means it's possible to stop. You don't have a power that's stronger. So yes, it's like this. Think of it like a person is a healthy human being. But he's possible that bacteria should attack. So as long as the flow is going, but it doesn't mean the flow has total immunity. It's possible because there's a chesarneh, there's a tzimtzum. The world is functioning, so it's like saying you're buying time. It's safe. But a lot of people you can say it's a ticking time bomb. Right now it's safe, but potentially anything can happen. Because the air of Bris Elam is just a regulated flow. So someone will say, does that mean you can't get suddenly toxins? You can get toxins. And that's what happened. That's the reason they can resist. On this level there can be the like we spoke before, Yunik, is the suckling of the outsiders, of the outlaws. The achiza here is even more, the achiza. Yeah, they grasp. They it's like the leeches, the parasites that, like the bat, like a bat. It latches onto your skin, and once the blood, the vampires, that's good. Spiritual vampires. They want to suck out.
Life force.
Even though there was a gili also from the level of Chachma, not just Bina where there could be Nikas and Chitzeni. Remember we spoke, when Chachma radiates, there's no room for Helam. Because the intensity of Chachma is complete Bittul, complete gili. It's when Bina start explaining it to people, that's when everybody can start interpreting in different ways. You can get lost and you can have a concealment. He's asking a question. We just said Iker Shechina, that the Shechina was B'tachdeim. That's also Chachma. There was a Gilei Chachma. That's why there was Iker Shechina. If it was just Bina, it wouldn't just be Iker Shechina. Hariloi Zeh Haya Iker HaMshacha. Nevertheless, that was not the primary transmission. The primary force was giving life existence. Was not the Chachma part. Okay. So he's adding now a new dimension of Chachma. You could have Chachma, but it's still not the primary. It's a little like by Noach. Well, Noach is a little stronger. Okay, let's see. And the second point, the Gili then, the first point is that it's not the primary force was creation. Creation is Bara Lakim. However, the purpose was there. But subjected to a little test, like Chet Eitzadas. Tell them not to eat. Chetzenim are right in there because Chachma is not dominating. It's just there. It's not dominating. That's why there could be this. A second thing is the Gili of Iker Shechina was not through Aveda. It was just a Gili Momaila. And that we also know is always open to challenge. Because it's not yours. You don't own it. Yeah. In other words, if someone lifts you up on their wings to a higher place, doesn't mean you're in a higher place. It means you're being carried by them. Left on your own, you can have trouble. In the parentheses, the Rebbe Rashab is qualifying an important thing. It says elsewhere that the Hamshacha that was through Aveda was Kim Rak Mashakol Hamshacha Shadei Aveda Hayitchilim Mitzanatzmi. It says in some places, how could there be Hamshacha altogether? If you don't have a halas matan, an effort from below, how could there be something from above? So it says that was all later. The first time, all the Hamshachas that we do today through Aveda came then one time from above. It says called halas man minei obey. You ever hear the expression? It's like from within himself, God made like what Aveda does. So he's qualifying. You can't say that's not the Aveda. You have the Hamshacha like through Aveda, but it's still not like actual command of Aveda. It's still not actual Aveda. So saying that, Kol Hamshacha Aveda Hitchilim Mitzadatzmi. Kimrak Mashakol. So it's the only thing you had is the Hamshacha that through Aveda was by itself. And in this Hamshacha, the beginning creation of the world, there could be an achiza, a grasp of the bats, of the parasites, of the vampires. And through this, the Geirim, the Rishoyim, in other words, the concealers, the air that was there should expire, should elevate, should be removed.
Why is it called the Shechina?
Because you have the Gili. What do you mean? He doesn't explain. He just it was not that. It was there, but he says it wasn't the main thing. It was in there. It was in the world, but it was not the primary force. And two, it came from above, not from below. What's the problem with that?
It came from above. It's not as strong as it comes from
Yeah,
above.
but the
That's the
Gilui-
second
oh,
thing.
The Gilui here in this world was higher, bigger than the Gilui in Atzilus at that point.
He's not talking about
What's
that.
Iker Shechina?
That whatever was not Atzilus was on earth. Chachma radiated through all of existence.
Now, das meint nicht, given a mile dole mata legabe.
No, he's not talking about. No,
You would say that
Whenever it says Iker Shechina, doesn't mean that here was much more than.
he's saying Iker Shechina. No, he's not talking about that part. He's just saying that the world was permeated.
why would you say Atzilus, not a Bria at that point? Because they knew there was God. They didn't feel. They had
First of all, he
self.
doesn't use the words Atzilus or Bria
He
altogether.
said Atzilus, so
I never doesn't say that here.
Oh, okay.
But I'd still say it's Atzilus, just for the record. Why not?
But there was they knew they had a sense of self.
Not before Chet Eitzadas.
They didn't.
That was the key difference. The Eitzadas made them have a sense of self.
And they didn't think there was any difference between them and the Eibishter at that point.
Yeah, that's exactly what Eitzadas changed.
And I know Eitzadas was on a level
Of Das.
Of Yetzirah.
I don't know. That's not what we're talking about here. And not in this mimer. Basically, it's quite clear. I mean, he's saying the beginning of creation, you had the God's goal, which is that he wanted Elikus on earth, so he had Elikus on earth.
Hashem didn't allow it to stay.
Right, and it didn't stay. It didn't remain. And when was it reversed? Now comes after the Rishayim come out Shabo Ha'avis, till the Avis came V'zachu, and they merit it. Like he asked the question, what's V'zachu? Digdak losh leimer V'zachu. Digdak leimer V'zachu. He emphasizes the word that says Digdak leimer, it emphasizes. Underscores the word V'zachu, they merit. I know. What does that mean? That's the Zachu. That through Aveda, specifically through Aveda, they drew down the energy in the Gili from Chachma. So what's the word Zachu add?
So, on my lane, I mean.
If it didn't say Zachu, one second. Okay, Zachu. Okay, Zachu emphasizes Aveda basically. Zachu. So if it wouldn't say Zachu, like he asked the question in the beginning, let me see how he said it. Yeah, because didn't they just come and brought a gili? They did something. For Zachu, they did Aveda to bring it down. It wasn't just something that happened. It was deliberate. Very good. Okay. Amar Aleim, so the Medrash continues. This all explained the Medrash. So he said on the Amar Aleim, so he said on them, we say on them, on the others, that is, Ani Mekeinos Elam, Lias Gili Elikus Be'elam.
Amar said, they should say that. Alei Amani Mechein Selam.
Oh, like that. You're right. Yeah, 1 second. Al Elu. It says Al Elu Ani Mechein. That's right. The Medrash it says Al Elu. But yeah, but that's the point. Yeah, you're right. Amar Aleim Ani Mechein. On them I established the world. He is Gili Elikus Be'elam. Because they bring that through Aveda, they brought down this Gili, that's Gili Elikus. What it says, the Mokim Hayim Avakish. Where's that? Let's see. Yeah. Eibush wanted to establish the world.
Why is it called Amokim?
Yeah, that was the question.
Oh, the Mokim, yeah. The Duke of Mokim. Mokim is the level, when you say God is Mokim, a space, is the level of Yesod Ima, the Yesod of Bina. Sounds like Tfuna. Kedisa b'kisvei Harizal, b'pirush Baruch HaMokim. In the meaning Baruch HaMokim, Baruch Hu, right? So Zeo Yesod Abba Hagonus b'Yesod Ima. Baruch HaMokim, blessed is the Mokim is Yesod Abba that's concealed, hidden in Yesod Ima. Okay, so now we're going to understand it based on what we
that
discussed.
draws down the Markim.
Yeah, Baruch.
So Midalzen was the Chochmah.
Let's see. V'zeu shaya mokim mavakish. That's what means mavakim mavakish. The b'chinas bina shemisham amshach b'chinas midah v'gvul. Bina, from there is the amshach, the transmission in a defined and parameters, as we spoke, which allows for unikas achitzenim, etc. Chaya mavakish yigilim b'chinas chochmah. That's the mavakish. Because that's what Abish is asking. Because he said, what does it mean that he's what do you mean Abish is asking to establish the world, that he needs permission? The Shem can stop him? Yeah, because it's Bina. It's not, of course we're talking about the Abish as he manifests in Bina, is asking, requesting, that the Gili should come from Chochmah, the Gili of the Kush, is Atachos HaKavana. It should be Gili Kush, and that's the ultimate purpose. V'zeu Shem Shechavis, and that's where the Ovis drew down. So that explains the whole idea. Because you're talking Hamokim, because the main force that gives creation power in the beginning is Hamokim, coming from Bina. It also has Chachma, Shechina, V'tachtena, but like you said, it's not primarily Chachma, and it's also not it's from above. So Mavakish, Bina requests a Gili from Chachma.
Is that having to do that he created the world through speech? Is that anything?
It doesn't say anything. You could say that. You could say Elokim, Precious Bar Elokim. V'zeu kimareish tzurim arenu d'itzu b'zeu z'abchinas midas shebechachma. And that means that the whole medrash was on the pasuk kimareish tzurim arenu, from the top of the mountains, from the top of the stone, top of the peaks. I will see. So he says, what's reish tzurim? So we learned that the ovis. That's the whole medrash began, right? Reish tzurim elo ovis. He says. The Isa Bezer should have b'chinas midas shebechachma. Isaiah says that's midas shebechachma, so it stems perfectly. That's the obvious. Or mikboyis asherenu. How we translate gvoyis? Gvoyis is hills, right? Asherenu, I will also gaze. It's like when I will seek or see through the tops of the peaks, and I will gaze through the hills. Right? A gaze is, I think, the right translation. Asherenu. Midah Shebabina. Is Midah Shebabina. The Hashem Eshit Psia Levar. As it says in Isaiah. The Eibishter extended Psia a step outward. We learned earlier this. If you remember, we learned it in Adenu Zenu. That whole Eshit Levar is so when your God is like here, Eshit Levar is taking a step out forward. Taking a step forward is already Bina, is extending Chachma into Bina. Sheba Bina. Yeah, it could be Hey. Okay, but it's still referring to Alakus. The Hey, Eshit Psi, you're right. The Hey, yeah. Because the Hey has a leg, yeah. You learned this, you want to know what chapter? I'll tell you right away. It was right here. Chapter. It's a very complicated chapter. That I remember very clearly. Here we are. Shambiura Azeir Bolak, that I remember. It was good to the guitar. Yeah, page 139, chapter 74. Just for the record. So look, see? 10 lines, like 7 lines from the top. So he doesn't connect it to Dibur Sheva Malchus, the Tfuna. Tfuna, Ma Mishnat. Ayin Shab Shekasu Ki Avav Ubchina Zah. Apsi Labad Eishit Chutz Latzmi Shosh Gam Bchina Bina. Very good. Okay. Midas Shabasech Chutz Labad. Oh. Wow. Interesting. Okay, Psi Labad. This is also what it says in Medrash, that Mereish Surim, these are the patriarchs, the Ovis, the fathers. Why? The Ovis, Meshichu B'chinas Midas Shebechachma. Because that's what the Ovis did, they drew down the Midas in Chachma. Wow, so stimmt von aller Seiten. This is Anometzim we find, Shayamokim Avakish L'kenes Elam. We find because that's what the Eibishter wanted. He desired. He wanted to establish the world. There should be divine revelation in this world. That's how it was in the beginning of the creation. But the wicked did not allow it. Till the Ovis came with Zochab Avedosam. Basically, like he does always, he sums up the whole summary in a few lines again. They merited through their Aveda. That's the Aveshem Shichub Chins Midish B'Chachma. They drew down Mereish Surim Midish B'Chachma. Omar Aleim Ani Mekainen Aleim Ani Omar. The Eibishter said Aleim on them Ani Mekainen Sa'ilam. I established the world. Sheigil Elikus Lamata. So they're like as we spoke, they're the pioneers that established the foundations for Elikus and Welt, which will then now be able to build. We can bring down Elikus L'mayla Megvul.
Now like a chair with 3 legs.
Yeah, Gimel Ovis. Very, very good. I like this a lot. Gives you a real perspective on the Ovis, what they accomplished. They basically laid the ground for us to come in.
That's when the Eibishter wanted to destroy the Yidden in the Midbar. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, if a chair with 3 legs cannot hold them, then how can you expect a chair with 1 leg?
The Ovis were great people. Doctor. Did you realize that? I have a newfound respect for them after this Maimer. Yeah. I'm proud. Good grandfathers. Okay, Kitzer. So this is a Kitzer of the whole chapter. The Atzmis Hamidus Hein Loi B'Bchinas Hispalus. Okay, so he begins like that. The Atzmis Hamidus are not in the form of Hispalus v'Yiseirus. Really, the core midas there in Meich and Chochmah are not excitement and stimulated. Ki mitzad hashleimus. So he clearly states the Rambam. It comes from shleimus. V'hu mideisav yizbarach hakol echad. And he and his mideisav, the Eibishter, is all one, as he spoke in the beginning. He skips even the inyan of that the Chokrim say. He goes straight to the source. Goes straight to the point. That it's atzmis. And that's how the midas are from the level of chokhmah. The bina himakanayish talshus liz b'chinas nivdal. Bina is already the source of ishtalshus. That's like he said the kavamida. I'll say in a second. In order to realize that there should be something nivdal, separate and detached and apart. B'chinas kavamida liz agbola. That's the kavamida, the regulator, yardstick. That there should be agbola, parameters. And the energy, the light should not be like the core. That's essence. Chochmah is higher than the regulator. He reishis ishtalshus, not mokir. Reishis, the head of ishtalshus. Yisagili kameas, that the gili should be like the core. Because from the perspective of chochmah, or due to chochmah, the gili also radiates also in malchus. V'zeu de b'shem ab. V'zeu de b'shem ab gam he'achlein b'mili yud. Clearly says it. That's why Shem Ab, which is Chachmah, even the final Hey is also Mili Yud. Hey Yud. Malchus, in other words, is b'mili. Yud. V'chachmah he ikra Atzilus. Chachmah is the primary force of Atzilus. V'zeu Shem Shicha Ovis. This is what the Ovis drew down. V'zeu Mili Achson, the B'chinas Malchus she'yigili Elikus. That's the Mili Achson, that Malchus, which was lacking something, they compensated for that lack. There should be the divine revelation. Shelo yi unikas hachatzenim. There shouldn't be a suckling of the vampires, of the outlaws, the outsiders. The piafkes. Okrisis b'chinas Neach, b'chinas Bina, okrisis b'chinas Avraham, b'chinas Chachma. He goes straight to the Pirush here. That the covenant with Neach was the level of Bina, the covenant with Avraham was the level of Chachma. This means Mareish Surim El Havis, that's Midash Chachma. Bikash L'kein and Aseilim Li is Gila Elikus Be'elam. Our desire to establish the world, there should be Gila Elikus Be'elam.
This is based on Avraham, is because Midash Chachma.
Yeah. So do we stop here or do we continue?
Depends how you
It's a
feel.
short class.
Feel well?
I feel better when I teach, so it's always good. And the problem is, it's a new Indian. It's not that I can start, but how far are we going to go? I don't like to go into. It's mamash annoying. It's literally a new subject.
Okay, I'm stuck with it.
What time do we have?
9:50.
Yeah, let's stop. It's fine. We'll stop here. Sometimes restraint. Okay, one second. We finished the Maimer for 38, and we did the last page 300. 300. Finished the Maimer on Bolok, Reish Surim, and we're going to begin the next class.
Shame.
Pinchas. That's page 300. Okay.